December 14, 2025. Eastern Caribbean Sea, north of the Venezuelan coast. 0440 local time, just before sunrise. A United States Coast Guard cutter was operating under radio silence on a standard counter-narcotics patrol track. Sea state was moderate. Winds were steady from the east at approximately 12 knots. Visibility was sufficient for surface tracking, with no commercial traffic reported in the immediate area. At that time, the ship's surface search radar registered a contact at the outer edge of detection range. The return was small, low profile, and moving north at a sustained high rate of speed. No automatic identification signal was present. The contact itself was not unusual for this region. What raised concern was its timing, its course, and the precision of its movement relative to known trafficking lanes used by criminal networks operating out of Venezuela. Initial intelligence from the previous night suggested no departures were expected during this window. That assessment no longer aligned with what was forming on the radar display. Why was a fast-moving vessel transiting this corridor before daylight? Why was it holding a steady heading directly across established patrol geometry? And why did the available intelligence fail to account for a contact now closing distance at speed? At that moment, the operational picture no longer matched the forecast, and the discrepancy demanded immediate attention. The operational picture at that hour involved a single United States Coast Guard medium endurance cutter assigned to Joint Interagency Task Force South, operating in coordination with regional air assets. The cutter carried a standard law enforcement detachment, a flight crew for an embarked MH-60 helicopter, and two rigid hull inflatable boats secured on the aft deck. The patrol area sat astride a well-documented maritime corridor linking the northern coast of Venezuela with transshipment points deeper in the Caribbean basin. Intelligence briefings prior to the patrol identified the threat environment as elevated but inconclusive. Recent seizures in the region had disrupted several trafficking schedules, increasing the likelihood of independent movements rather than coordinated convoys. Analysts assessed that criminal groups operating from Venezuela were likely to rely on low-profile, high-speed vessels capable of running without lights and without electronic identification. Those assessments, however, placed the highest probability of movement later in the night, not in the narrow window before sunrise, now unfolding on the cutter's bridge. From an observational standpoint, the situation remained ambiguous. The radar contact speed exceeded that of typical fishing traffic, yet its track showed discipline and consistency, inconsistent with random coastal movement. At the same time, the contact did not display the erratic maneuvers often associated with vessels already aware of law enforcement presence. The mismatch between intelligence expectations and real-time sensor data left commanders working with an incomplete picture, forcing decisions to be based on observed behavior rather than forecast models. The cutter adjusted course gradually, increasing speed while maintaining radio silence. On the bridge, watchstanders tracked the contact as range decreased mile by mile. The target continued northbound at an estimated speed exceeding 30 knots, holding a straight line that cut cleanly across the patrol box. Distance closed from over 40 nautical miles to the low 30s within the first half hour, confirming sustained engine output rather than a brief burst of speed. Sea conditions remained steady. Swells rolled in from the east, 3 to 4 feet, producing a consistent rise and fall under the hull. The soundscape on deck was limited to wind across steel, the low vibration of propulsion, and the periodic radar updates called out quietly on the bridge. No visual contact had been established yet. The horizon remained dark, with the first indications of dawn still below the eastern cloud layer. Standard intercept geometry was applied. The cutter held an offset approach, avoiding a direct collision course that could alert the contact prematurely. Flight operations were delayed pending further classification, and the helicopter remained secured, crews standing by. On the aft deck, the rigid hull inflatable boat teams conducted final checks without launching, securing gear, and confirming communications. At this stage, the operation remained observational, with commanders prioritizing identification and intent before escalation. As the range continued to close, the contact altered behavior. Its speed increased noticeably, pushing beyond previous estimates and widening the wake signature now visible on radar. Moments later, the vessel extinguished all navigation lights. The radar return remained steady, but visual acquisition became more difficult as the surrounding sea absorbed what little ambient light remained before sunrise. The change suggested awareness, either of patrol presence or of a narrowing operational window. The cutter responded by transitioning from observation to controlled escalation. A standard hailing call was prepared, but not immediately transmitted, in accordance with protocol designed to preserve tactical advantage. The commanding officer authorized aviation deployment, and the flight deck crew moved without delay. Within minutes, the MH-60 helicopter was brought to readiness, rotors turning as the aircraft lifted off and assumed a forward position along the contact's projected track. The helicopter maintained altitude sufficient to remain outside visual detection while providing surface search support. Infrared sensors began sweeping ahead, feeding real-time imagery back to the cutter. On the stern, one rigid hull inflatable boat was lowered to launch readiness. The boarding team took positions, equipment secured, awaiting the order to deploy. Each step followed established procedures, balancing the need to assert law enforcement authority against the risk of provoking sudden evasive maneuvers at high speed. At this point, the logic of the operation shifted. The objective was no longer simple identification. The contact's actions had introduced variables that required active control of space, time, and movement, narrowing the margin for error as daylight approached. The helicopter established positive visual contact shortly after closing within several thousand yards. Infrared imagery confirmed a low profile, open hull vessel powered by multiple outboard engines. Heat signatures indicated at least 3 individuals on board. The vessel continued at high speed, making minor course corrections that suggested manual steering rather than autopilot. No identifying markings were visible. No flags were displayed. With range now measured in hundreds of yards, the cutter initiated the first law enforcement hailing call over loudspeaker. identifying itself and directing the vessel to slow and prepare to be boarded. There was no response. The target instead executed a shallow turn to port, attempting to cross the cutter's bow at speed. The maneuver reduced separation rapidly and introduced the risk of collision if left unchecked. The cutter altered course to maintain lateral spacing, while the helicopter descended to a lower altitude, positioning off the vessel's starboard quarter. A warning flare was deployed ahead of the vessel's projected path, burning bright against the dark water. The flare marked distance and intent without direct engagement. Seconds later, objects were observed being thrown overboard from the moving craft, splashing in a staggered pattern consistent with jettisoned cargo. At that point, the rigid-hull inflatable boat was launched. The small craft accelerated hard, closing from the cutter's stern, while the helicopter maintained overwatch. The target's speed dropped abruptly as its engines throttled back, wake diminishing as forward motion decreased. The vessel came nearly dead in the water, its crew raising hands as the boarding team approached. The sequence unfolded in less than a minute, with minimal room for correction once it began. Once the vessel was secured, Coast Guard personnel conducted an initial safety sweep. The boarding team confirmed that the engines were disabled and that no additional individuals were concealed on board. 3 suspects were detained without resistance and moved under control. The vessel itself showed signs of long-range modification, including reinforced fuel storage and minimal onboard equipment beyond navigation essentials. Its condition was consistent with a single purpose, trafficking run, rather than routine maritime activity. Recovery operations began immediately. The cutter maneuvered to mark the points where objects had been jettisoned. Using guidance from the helicopter, crews recovered multiple floating bales from the water. Each package was wrapped in waterproof material and waited for rapid disposal. Field testing conducted on board identified the substance as cocaine. Preliminary estimates placed the total weight at several hundred pounds, though final measurements would be completed once the evidence was fully secured and cataloged. The detained individuals were transferred to the cutter for processing. Evidence was photographed, logged, and secured in accordance with seizure protocol. No injuries were reported among Coast Guard personnel or detainees. The seized vessel was brought alongside under tow as daylight began to break across the eastern horizon, revealing calm seas and clear operating conditions at the conclusion of the intercept. The operation concluded shortly after sunrise, with the patrol area returning to routine monitoring status. All recovered contraband was secured below deck, and the detainees remained under supervision pending transfer to federal authorities. The cutter resumed a reduced speed profile as command staff reviewed the sequence of events and verified compliance with established counter-narcotics procedures. Air assets recovered without incident, and small boat crews were secured as the sea state remained stable. From observation alone, the encounter illustrated how rapidly conditions can shift along these routes. A single radar return, initially indistinct, developed into a full intercept within a narrow time window. Decisions were driven not by assumptions, but by real-time behavior measured in speed, distance, and response. The operation ended without casualties or damage, but it underscored how little margin exists when trafficking activity intersects with enforcement presence in open water.